Well, we got Lauren Hardy with us here today from Wholesaling Inc. So head over to laurenhardyco.com to learn about what her and her team are doing. But in a nutshell, we're going to be talking about virtual wholesaling today. So this is going to be a great topic. I really appreciate your time here, Lauren.
Hey, I appreciate you having me.
Oh, well, this is going to be a big topic. People are always getting into real estate investing for the first time. They're looking at wholesaling. That concept of doing it virtually is always appealing, but it seems like people need to have a better understanding of wholesaling in general first. But before they jump into it, what are some of the things that they maybe should think about and consider when they're just getting into wholesaling? Let's bust a couple myths.
Well, I think the most important thing to consider is where you are trying to wholesale properties, is this a territory that is a viable territory for wholesaling? So a lot of people, when they're first getting into it, they think that wholesaling can be done easily where. And from my experience, and I was that person as well when I got started 10 years ago, from my experience, not every territory is the same. And some territories are more conducive to our business than others. So the first thing you should go is, if you're trying to do this in your backyard, is your backyard conducive to wholesaling? Is this the best market? Or are you going to be facing a lot of challenges just right out the gate, where maybe if you chose another market, you wouldn't have these challenges?
Sure. Well, that makes a lot of sense. The problem I have, well, I've tried to do a little virtual wholesaling. I do a lot of wholesaling in my backyard, but the problem that I seem to have is when I'm trying to make that personal connection with the individual
Mhm.
and trying to get the property, under contract. What type of strategies and tactics have you figured out to kind of make that natural connection?
So you have to get really good on the phone. That's really important. And that's a skill that you're going to have to build in yourself. So we started with a really good script. Part of the reason I went virtual, I always say, like, I was kind of doing this over the phone virtually before I was actually technically working virtual, because my area, the traffic is really bad. So I wouldn't want to like go drive to sellers' houses unless I knew they were really serious about selling, and like we pretty much had a price that we agreed on. So I wouldn't go to sellers' houses or making an offer anyway, because if I were to do that, it would take me 4 hours, like just to get, there and back, with California, with SoCal traffic. So I had to get good at first at just building enough rapport with the seller where I could figure out that we're on the same page with price and that it is worth my time to get in my car. So I recommend you do the same. You've got to get a really good script, and you've got to deliver your offer with confidence. The question I get the most is, how do you get a seller to actually like sign a contract over the phone when they've never met you? I remember before I went full blown virtual, listening to a podcast of a guy that was virtual, and that was in my head. That was the limiting belief. How am I ever going to convince a seller to accept sign a contract when they've never seen me in person? That seems impossible. You've got to get yourself over that limiting belief. If you explain to the seller what your process is, and this is just part of your process, you'd be surprised, about 99% of the time they are willing to, move forward with your process the way you've got it set up.
Mm-hmm. That's funny you bring that up, because that's very true, is setting that stage and going through the whole process so that they understand the process. It really does not only add a level of professionalism into it, shows that you know what you're doing, but they're typically, it's easier for them to buy in. They understand that process.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the first virtual market. You're in California. Where was the first market you tried to tackle? And did
Yeah.
you
So
focus on one market?
yes, I did. So the first market I chose was Nashville, Tennessee. And I didn't really put much thought behind it. There's definitely more thought behind markets now that I've, been more experienced with it. At the time, I just thought this seems like a really cool place to visit. So that's how I landed there. And the first thing I did, actually, I wasn't wholesaling. At first, I was building houses in Nashville. My background, I started flipping houses. So I started as a house flipper in my local market in the Orange County, Southern California area. So like I would do LA County, Riverside, San Bernardino, and Orange County. So being kind of where I started out as a flipper, what would happen is I would run into properties that I wouldn't actually want. And so I would wholesale like what I didn't want. But my primary goal was like, can I flip this property? So I went with that mindset in Nashville. I went with, can I, flip or develop this property? And I would wholesale what I didn't want.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So so you didn't really have any background on that city up until then.
No.
Do you still do the wholesaling in that market today?
No, I don't. So Nashville at the time was like the number one real estate market in the country. So I had discovered that I left Orange County to go to basically to face the same problems where I was trying to avoid a very saturated competitive market and territory. And Nashville was becoming very saturated and competitive because of just where it was in the marketplace at that time. Actually, I mean, it's still plenty of people are moving to Nashville. It's a booming area. So I eventually left Nashville. I did hang out for a couple years and did some great deals. But as I started feeling like, I'm dealing with the same challenges I did in my backyard, I might as well just do this in my backyard. That's when I left and I moved on to, I chose a more stable market of Oklahoma City and Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So you early when we started the conversation, you mentioned you need to make sure it's a viable market. What are some of those measurements that you go by now to determine whether that's a market you want to tackle?
Yeah. So actually, the way I like to think it, and if you're going at this as like you're a wholesale, this is what you have to kind of put in your head is so wholesaling, the entire concept is you are getting a property at a discount and then you are going to sell it to another investor who has the expectation of it being still at a discount, but you've sold it just high enough to make a spread for yourself. So for you to be able to get properties at a discount, you need to be able to convince a seller to take a discount on their home. It really all boils down to that. So I think about in this market, is there seller motivation? Would it be easy to convince a seller to take a discount in this market or not? So if you looked at every market, and if you're listening to this right now, look at your market right now and go on Zillow and look at the average house prices and ask yourself, is this an area where sellers may be motivated? Would there be some distress here? Or is this an area where, sellers can basically list their house on the market and it be sold really quick? So a lot of that comes with average price point in the area. In Orange County, I mean, I haven't checked. It's been going up every single month. So the last I checked, it was $900,000. The average house price is $900,000, give or take, in my area. So even when it wasn't 900, when it was lower, it was still very hard to get a seller to take a discount on their home. They just didn't need to. There was too much demand for real estate. So it was really difficult to get those deals. There's such a limited amount of distressed sellers here, and there's a high amount of investors. There's a lot of people that are cash buyers in Orange County. They're not just wholesalers or real estate investors. Like there are just people that have cash because they're independently wealthy, so a cash offer is not very competitive here. So I have noticed in say the $200,000 range average purchase price in the area, that's when you start getting a more seller motivation. So around 200K, maybe 250, because gosh, everything's going up, by the minute here, is where you start getting in a territory where sellers are a little bit more motivated. Does wholesaling work in the higher price that like maybe average house price 350 to 500? Yeah, sure, absolutely. But I prefer to go in markets where it is a little bit lower priced if my end game is wholesaling. Also, I really love those markets because those are markets where a lot of hedge fund activity is, and a primary buyer that I sell to is a hedge fund. And those are markets where, the rent to price ratio is very attractive. They can, really maximize their margins on their rentals in that price point. So that's sort of what I look for in a market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're kind of feeding the machine right now. We hear the hedge funds going in and buying up a lot of properties, but you're using that as a big aspect of one of your exit strategies.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to know that there's hedge funds in a market I'm at.
Sure.
Mhm.
So is there a way to find out if there's a hedge fund in the markets that you're at?
It takes a little digging. I think there's a few different ways you could figure it out. If you happen to know names of hedge funds, you can look on their website and they will usually list the markets that they're buying in. But another way is you could just pull a list and say property upstream. Or if you have investor lift as well, and you can pull a list of like recent purchases in the last 6 months, and you'll see, that there's maybe someone who's buying some entity that's buying, 20 houses in the last 6 months or more. That's when you
Mhm.
usually know it's a hedge fund.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense, especially regarding all of that. I was just going to ask you, if you don't have that as an option and you're going into these virtual markets, how have you found ways to establish that buyer's list you're going to need to wholesale too? But it sounds like you usually pulling those lists from PropStream or what have you.
Yes. So a lot of reverse engineering with lists is a great way to start. We will pull lists. We'll send mass text messages, saying, "Hey, we have a deal in this area. I saw you bought one here. Are you looking to buy more deals?" We'll market ourselves in that way and try to build a relationship and then add them to our buyers list. We also go on like Facebook in the local real estate investment association Facebook pages. That's a really great resource. So we will always post our deals on there, and that's where we've found a lot of our buyers.
Well, would you mind now that you're let's take Oklahoma for example. Talk us through the process, like from what do you do for you're finding your leads today?
To get the seller leads for
Yeah.
the properties. Yeah. So I'm always doing direct to seller marketing. So that's kind of my thing, what I'm known for. I have never really bought anything off the MLS. I don't work the MLS or agent listed deals. There are wholesalers that do. I just never really have done that. I am all about the direct to seller stuff. So we do a lot of, cold calling, text messages. We have a TV ad. So that's how we're getting a lot of our deals. And it really does take a lot of leads, to get that one deal. So, there's a lot of talking to a lot of sellers, building rapport, making a lot of offers, to finally landing that one deal.
Sure. And then once you get it in somebody in your pipeline, talk a little bit about the process there. Since you're doing it remotely, do you do Zoom calls with them? Is it just strictly phone? Like what does the process look like?
Yeah, so it's all over the phone. When we get someone into our, say they got a marketing piece from us, we will, make sure we get them on the phone and we have kind of a basic property questionnaire that we get asked. We ask them at first. And it does take a minute to kind of get through all the questions. We really want to verify the property details. And then from there, once we have all the property details, we come up with an offer price without seeing it. So sight unseen offer. And we will get the, seller back on the phone and we'll say, okay, this is what we are, offering for your property. They don't always say yes at first. Sometimes it's, I'll think about it. Sometimes it's no way. And then we put them on a follow-up sequence, just kind of depending on their response. So yeah, it's a lot of that. It's a lot of following up until you get the seller, ready. When they're ready to sell, and we have an agreed price, we send them the contract through DocuSign so they can do it with a click of the button. There are some sellers that are not internet savvy, and what we will do in that case, we have some boots on ground in our markets. We will have our representative who's out there go meet the seller and hand them the contract. And when the seller signs, they get it back and they will scan it to us. So that's how we, help that seller. Sometimes we get sellers too that say, listen, like I'm old school. I want to shake your hand and meet you in person. That's when we would, send the representative as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you get the property under contract. What type of due diligence do you do at that point? And I'm sure you need photos and a few other things.
Mhm.
Is that when you send your boots on the ground to that property
Yes.
as well?
Yeah. So our goal is to know within 2 weeks, 14 days, what we're going to do with that property. So we will first schedule a photo appointment. Usually that photo appointment takes like the first week up because, it's coordinating with tenants or the seller's schedule or our schedule. We get the photos back. We look at the photos and we think, okay, we underwrite. I call underwriting the deal, and I think, okay, if I were to flip it, could I make this price work given the photo condition? If I were to hold it as a rental, is this something that would work? As a rental for a hedge fund. If we determine that the pricing still looks okay, we will show it to our buyers on our buyers list, and we would have a open house kind of date scheduled already with the seller at that point for maybe the following week or maybe a few days after that, and we would get buyers into it, and we get the buyer feedback. Hopefully, we get lots of offers on the home. That's the hope, and at that point, we know by 14 days, like what, are we wholesaling this deal? Is it something I'm going to buy myself to flip because I still get to cherry pick what I want as well, which is a benefit to being a wholesaler, or is it like crickets? No, for example, we had that happen just now. We knew a property. I had a feeling that it was overpriced after seeing the photos, but it was in a good area. So it was kind of like, maybe we can see maybe this is more of a landlord deal. It's not a flip, but maybe a landlord deal. So we marketed it. It was still crickets, didn't get any, traction on it. So, we called the seller, let them know, like, we're not going to move forward at this price, but this is what I like to have is a price that I will move forward at. Sometimes that's difficult when you get no buyer feedback at all. So luckily I am a buyer. So I put my price in and I say, okay, well, I would buy it if it was this. So I think one thing that's really helpful, and I think a lot of new wholesalers, and also like I see wholesalers have been doing this forever, and they really don't understand property values. They don't know how to flip a house. Like they don't know all the costs that are involved. So they can't confidently go back to the seller and say, I need it at this price. So I think if you want to really be a good wholesaler, it wouldn't hurt to learn how to flip houses, learn how to, buy a home and hold it as a rental so you understand the pricing. And, you can price homes out, accurately.
Well, with the huge fluctuation in price, when it comes to cost right now, how have you been able to adapt to that then?
Do you mean like construction supply?
Yeah, construction.
I will admittedly say construction is the biggest bottleneck in my company right now.
Yeah, that doesn't.
Pretty bad.
Yeah,
pretty bad. Yeah, we have a deal right now, a big project, and I can't find a GC to work on this thing. It's just been sitting. So we're subbing out everything ourselves, and we're doing it from across the country. So it's pretty frustrating. It wasn't like that, years ago. It was a lot easier, So it is really interesting, what's going to happen. I like to, I know a lot about market cycles. That's kind of, I've always been pretty educated in market cycles. And I fully can say now I have operated in almost one full cycle, depending on what happens next. So I got in this business like the last day of the recession. Like I joke, but seriously, it was like the last day of the recession is when I first started real estate investing. And I've seen, it go all the way up. And I'll tell you, in that recession time, it's pretty easy to find a contractor, a good one who's hungry and will work with you on price. And then it's like interesting how now with demand so high, contractors are super, super busy. So yeah, that's a bottleneck. That's where we're at right now in the market.
And then we had such a low inventory for real estate in itself. How did you cope with that? Did you change any tactics in trying to find that next deal?
Absolutely. I mean, we've had to be so competitive with seller marketing, and it's not easy. You definitely have to try, all the things, and your sales funnel management needs to be really, really strong, and no lead gets left behind. If you're spending marketing dollars, you need to make sure that every one of those sellers gets an offer, from you. Every one of those sellers gets worked. Something that I transitioned to this year that I never did before was really focusing on monetizing every single lead. So, because it has taken more leads to get that one deal. So what do you do with the 45 leads that you didn't make a deal out of? We now are referring those leads to realtors, so in the hope that, maybe one of those becomes a listing, and we get a referral fee for that. So that's something that we've done this year that, we didn't really feel the need to in previous years. I probably should have. I didn't really realize how much money I was throwing away. So we even are like, now it's kind of the new forward thinking thing that I want to do is actually have like an in-house realty arm, to work those leads that, we're not using right now. So.
Yeah. Well, when you have that many referrals, how do you trust and verify the realtor and that everything's going to work out there?
Yeah. So that's been a big bottleneck as well. So in one territory, we have an awesome realtor who's doing everything like, we have a Google spreadsheet, that she like updates to let us know like seller's been, reached out to and have a listing appointment on this day. And then we have another realtor who we put on the same process and he doesn't update anything. And we haven't seen one listing come out of him. Whereas like the other girl, we've seen a couple listings come out of her. So you definitely have to find a good realtor who's hungry, humble. I think that, the difference I can tell is this other realtor seems a little fat and happy already. He's kind of got a pretty active business as it is. So I think he's not taking our leads very seriously because he has to split, them with us. So it is finding that right realtor, and making sure that they are working your leads. Again, this is something new this year that we started doing. Haven't refined the process, but that's what motivated me to actually get somebody more like in-house, set up an actual team, like a realty arm that's a team with the team name and all that, and, that way I can kind of have a little bit more control over them and I can see, what they're doing a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, there's been a couple times now where you mentioned having your boots on the ground and somebody going over to the house, maybe to do a walkthrough or get the paperwork signed or validate a few things. How important is it to have, when you're getting into virtual wholesaling, how important is it to have a boots on the ground in that market?
Yeah, I know it's super important. It's super important. In fact, there's going to be a certain point as you get busier and busier where you might have to hire somebody full time, So the first stage when you're new is I say find another wholesaler and just JV with them, joint venture. And that is the easiest way. You don't have to pay them per hour, that's the best way when you're a newbie to start out. Always start out with a JV. That's how we start out, and we're not newbies. We still start with JVs in every market we're in. If we're in a market and we've never done a deal there, like we will try to find another wholesaler to work the deal. Number two, next phase is I call it getting a runner. So a runner is maybe someone that you found on Craigslist. They work, when you need them, totally part-time, not a set schedule, at maybe $20 an hour. And they go and you teach them how to take property photos and how to meet sellers and how to talk to sellers. Pretty simple training. It takes us like an hour to train them. And that is the person that we've ran off for a long time. We are now, there's a point where you hit where the runner it becomes a little bit chaotic, like not having just this full-time person that is available. And so we've just now hired like a full-time representative full-time there. That's the first time I've ever done that. So I'm excited because we've just exceeded that place where the runner is not going to work. We need a more reliable presence. So I'm pretty excited about that.
So you mentioned, especially when you're getting into a market for the first time and you're still using joint ventures, to accomplish this. How do you get, I'm going to just guess now based on some experience, there's kind of a mindset there as well to get over the fact that you have splitting the deal or the other guy might steal the deal or a variety of things there. How do you work through some of that?
Yeah. Okay. So, I have I don't know if we've mentioned it, but I do have a coaching program. I've coached a lot of students on virtual wholesaling. I think we've had over 370 students at least. And so that is a number one thing. And I say like, this is one of the commandments, like thou shalt get a JV partner. You have to just trust me on this one. Okay. I've wholesaled, I think it's 6 markets total. And every time I start in a new market, I don't care how experienced I've been, it is a whole new animal figuring out this market and figuring out pricing and figuring out the best buyers in the market. And every time we've tried to do it on our own, we'll get about 5 properties under contract and we can't move any of them. And we've got everything priced wrong. And we try to do it ourselves. It doesn't work. And so then we go to we lean on a runner or a JV partner, right? And then the JV lets us know why they're not moving or the JV moves it, and we go, wow, how did you do that? We couldn't do it on our own, and we have PropStream and Investor Lift and all these tools. We still couldn't do it. So there's just something to, cutting the learning curve that has value. And to me, if you can save me time in learning about this market and you can close a deal, and I would rather get 50% of something than 0% of nothing, right? So
Yeah.
so you really got to get over that and just be willing to share for a little bit until you're ready to go out it on your own.
Yeah, it's amazing how people will get held up on the concept of missing out
Mhm.
on half a deal or something, and then they miss out on the whole thing. It's such a cart before the horse
Oh my god.
situation.
Yes, it's like, totally they already think they're like cart before the horse. Like they're like, "Oh, but I'm gonna make 50,000 on this." And then it's like, "No, you're not." Like you're not gonna
Right.
find a buyer, I think is my guess. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot. I can't stress that enough. It's amazing what people we kind of get get locked in these type of scenarios. So
Right.
when you're doing this virtual wholesaling, it's one of those things. I've told quite a few people, especially when they're getting into wholesaling for the first time, the concept of getting a property under contract, everything gets so much easier when that first deal finally lands. There's like something that snaps or clicks,
Mhm.
that it finally makes it like in your mind, like, oh, actually is possible. This actually is going to work. Do you find that that's going to be that's the situation here, especially when it comes to virtual wholesaling?
Oh my gosh. Isn't everything like that? Like everything, it's amazing. You'll put something in your head, like this idea that I don't think it's going to work. I don't think I can do it, and then you got to ask yourself, like, well, why? Why are you saying that? You know? So, like, a perfect example is for a while, I have more managed my company, not worked in my company. After I got the coaching, program going, it became too much for me to do both. So I hired people under me to manage acquisitions, to manage the dispositions, right? And I'm just the
Right.
manager of them, right? I'm the one orchestrating it, but I'm not the one doing it. And our company grew to like doing more volume than even when I did it just solo operator, so that we have new processes, we have like a new way of doing dispositions. Well, after I had realized I kind of wasn't very confident in who I placed in dispositions, and I started noticing that she really wasn't working deals as hard as she should be. And I think my sales would be better if we had a better person in there. But I hadn't been in that role in so long that I kind of didn't know her process. I didn't even know really what she was doing. So I did let her go, and I committed to I'm going to go back into that role for a while so I can see what she's doing and I can make this role bulletproof and way better and raise the sales. But I'm not going to lie. Like going into it, having not gone into it, I started getting a lot of self-doubt. I started thinking, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I mean, I don't know. Like, what if I
Mhm.
can't do it as well as she did? And then I thought about it. Like, I was like, why are you saying that to yourself? Like, why are you saying that you can't do this? Like, is this just a mindset thing? Like, are you just getting in your head and saying you can't do it? Just, whatever. Like, of course, if you keep doing that, you're gonna not do it. You need to change your mindset. So, having even that self-awareness that even I do that sometimes, and it's been about a week into her role, and already I'm like, I think I am doing better than she did. So, we all do that. You got to get this mindset stuff. You got to fix the mind first. A lot
Mhm.
of people think virtual is a waste of time. I remember when I first went virtual, someone said, I think that's a shiny object, Lauren. You should probably stay in Southern California. If I would have stayed in Southern California, I'd have a full-time job, not in real estate. I wouldn't have been able to make this work here.
Right.
So it's all about mindset.
Mm. I keep focusing on the concept of this mindset, because there is something associated with that. And I always tell people that very first one is always going to be the hardest one. It's
Mhm.
going to be it's going to be a drudgery associated with it. You're going to
Mhm.
keep working out and doing those exercises and making those cold calls, and that first one is always the hardest. But for some reason, as soon as that first one hits, the second one is faster, the third one is even faster, the fourth one, I'm convinced it's all about the mindset. You're
Mhm.
finally convinced yourself that this actually works.
Mhm. Yep.
And it impacts everything, including how you interact and talk to the sellers.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So with all that being said, so how many markets are you in here now?
I'm in 3. And I'm trying to just get in 1. I used to like think that more is better, and I am less about that as I age in this industry. I want to do more in 1, market. I think that has been, the last year going, I could do bigger things, and I can be more competitive if I have, a stronger team in this one area versus kind of having a light team in 3 areas. So my new, kind of action is trying to kind of narrow this down, and maybe build a stronger team in 1.
So when you first started off, it was just a one-person show, right?
Uh-huh. Yep.
So how fast did you scale when you decided to let some of those activities go and you relying on a team?
Yeah, I was a one woman show for about 2 years. And then I hired just an assistant. He was supposed to be just basically me, but cloned. I just taught him how to do all the things I do,
Mhm.
and he just has to do it when I can't do it. So when I got started, I had young children. They're now 8 and 11 now, but at the time, Reese was like 1 years old. So she's my older one. I got in 10 years ago, and I was pregnant with Presley. So I knew there's going to be times where sellers, if sellers were calling for marketing, I can't pick up the phone. So I needed someone to do that, to service the customer as soon as possible and give the best customer service. And I knew if I was going to be the one responsible for it, I was going to do a bad job because of being home with the kids. So that was my first hire, was just someone to basically be seller facing. And that person still works with me to this day. He has done every role in the company. So he's got a pretty big role now. He underwrites the properties. He's the one deciding to put it under contract. He prices all of them out. And then we have someone under him that does the acquisitions.
So you mentioned how important is it to make sure that when somebody calls in regarding a lead that you respond right away? Like,
Oh,
have
it's
you
so important. There is competition in every single market, and the one thing I notice is our competition is not as good as us. So I would call our competition and not get a call back for 2 days. So you got to think, like, if I'm not getting a call back, like, I'm going to go on Google, and find the next person. So if you're, not getting back to sellers in a timely basis, like, you're going to lose that lead. They're going to be off calling someone else.
Yeah, I forget where I see it, but I even I think I've seen statistics where if you wait a day, you cut your opportunity on that lead in well over half, if not more.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's just basic sales and marketing. If
Right.
you wait, so we say get a hold of them as soon as possible. Like, no, we have our TV ads answered live, and then we, not any longer than 24 hours.
Sure.
Mhm.
So can you give us an example of one of your students? Let's say they came in here, they didn't know really anything about virtual wholesaling, let alone wholesaling, and
Mhm.
where they are at in a like within a year.
Gosh, there's so many different student avatars. I have some students that just come right out of the gate on fire. And those are always the funnest, to get the ones that are just in that mode of like, I'm going to make this work. That's my favorite student. If you want to make wholesaling work, you got to have that attitude of like, ever it takes, and don't, like, you need to take action immediately and take action every single day and do exactly what I say. Don't waver. I can always tell when students are like mixing my advice with YouTube University. Get off YouTube University, focus on what I'm telling you to do. I put a blueprint. So I have a checklist, and I make my students go through the whole blueprint. And by the end of that blueprint, they've got a wholesale deal if they do what I say.
Sure.
So yeah, I've had some amazing, amazing student success stories. In fact, I heard just recently one of my past students now has like a team of 8 in an office. I have one student from India. He closed his first year 500,000 in gross wholesale fees his first year, all the way from India. He was wholesaling in Indianapolis. So that's pretty cool. I've got another guy. He was doing it from Spain. He's done remarkably well. So yeah, I definitely have some really awesome student success stories. I actually put them on my YouTube channel.
Sure. Well, I just really appreciate your time here, Lauren. Again, it's laurenhardyco.com. Check it out. And I mean, there's a lot of great information, especially on the YouTube channel. So I'll make sure to have that link in the show notes. But Lauren, this has been a great conversation. I hope you consider coming back. But before I let you go, is there a question or concept you wish we would have covered here for people today?
Oh man, I always, it's always that last question that you guys stump me on. Honestly, I like to end usually with like a book recommendation or like maybe just something, a resource that's helped me. So when I
Sure.
first got started, the book I think that motivated me the most and helped me get going was The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. So
Mhm.
it's a book that stresses that the little things that you do every day, these little actions and these choices that you make every day, they seem so small and they don't seem to get you anywhere at first, but there is a compound effect to that. So it's a pretty motivating book. I try to like pick it up every year. So yeah,
Sure.
that's what I want to leave you guys off with.
I'll make sure to have a link to that book in the show notes. I appreciate it again, Lauren. This is great. I hope you'll consider coming back sometime.
Awesome. I'd love to.